A black female cashier, feeling hurt and exhausted after being humiliated by a customer, suddenly noticed an elderly woman in a wheelchair shivering in the rain. Without hesitation, she rushed outside and pushed the wheelchair into the supermarket. She then ran to the shelves, pulled out the last $15 from her envelope, and bought the thickest wool scarf, wrapping it tightly around the elderly woman's bluish shoulders to preserve a bit of warmth. What Sarah did not know was that at that very moment inside the store, a man was quietly watching her every action. He was the old woman's son, a billionaire, and that small act of kindness would push Sarah into a life-changing turning point no one could have foreseen. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. The fluorescent lights of Tower Mart buzzed like angry wasps overhead. Sarah Williams wiped down the checkout counter for the third time that hour, her fingers raw from the chemical smell of the disinfectant. The store was nearly empty, just the usual Thursday afternoon lull in South Atlanta, where even buying groceries felt like a luxury most folks couldn't afford. Williams! She flinched. That voice could cut through steel. Dennis Holloway stood at the end of the aisle, arms crossed over his barrel chest. His manager's badge caught the light like a tiny shield. "Line's backing up. Move it." Sarah glanced at the register. 2 customers. Hardly a line. But she nodded anyway. "Yes, sir." The first customer, Mrs. Chen from down the block, gave her a sympathetic look as she slid her items across the scanner. Sarah rang up the dented cans and day-old bread without comment. She knew that look, the one that said, "I'm buying what I can afford, not what I want." "That'll be $12.47. Mrs. Chen counted out exact change, mostly quarters. Sarah waited patiently, ignoring Holloway's heavy sigh from across the store. The next customer wasn't as kind. A middle-aged man in a business suit slammed his energy drinks on the counter. "You people ever think about moving faster? I got places to be." "I apologize, sir. Let me just scan the damn drinks." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she kept her face neutral. She'd learned that skill young, how to swallow anger until it sat like a stone in your stomach. The register beeped. $8.99. He thrust a 20 at her and snatched his change without a word. The door chimed as he left. Sarah exhaled slowly, her shoulders dropping an inch. Through the grimy store windows, she could see the sky darkening. Storm clouds rolled in like a bruise spreading across the horizon. Then she noticed the wheelchair. An elderly woman sat just outside the store's overhang, her thin frame hunched against the wind. White hair whipped around her face. She wore a cardigan so thin Sarah could practically see through it. "Hey!" Sarah leaned toward Marcus, the bag boy. "You see that lady out there?" Marcus glanced up from his phone. "Yeah, someone dropped her off like 20 minutes ago. Said they'd be right back." 20 minutes. Sarah's stomach dropped. In this weather. The first drops of rain began to fall. Within seconds, it became a downpour. The woman's wheelchair was just beyond the overhang's protection. Rain pelted her face and shoulders. Sarah didn't think. She just moved. "Williams, where the hell do you think you're going?" She ignored Holloway and pushed through the door. The rain hit her like a wall of ice. Her uniform shirt was soaked through in seconds. She grabbed the wheelchair handles and pushed her sneakers slipping on the wet pavement. "It's okay," she said, not sure if the woman could even hear her over the rain. "I've got you." The woman's eyes were vacant, unfocused. Rain dripped from her chin. When Sarah finally got her under the overhang and into the store entrance, she could see the woman's lips had a blue tinge. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" No response. The woman was shivering violently, her hands trembling in her lap. Sarah knelt down, heedless of the puddle forming beneath her. She gently touched the woman's hand, ice cold. She looked into those distant eyes and saw something that made her chest ache, complete helplessness. This woman wasn't just cold. She was lost. Marcus grabbed some towels from the back. "Sarah Holloway's gonna—" "Now, Marcus." She stood up, her mind racing. The woman needed warmth. Real warmth. Sarah's eyes swept the store and landed on the clearance rack near the entrance. Scarves, gloves, winter stuff they were trying to unload before spring. Her hand went to her pocket. The envelope she'd tucked there this morning crinkled under her fingers. $15. That was it. That was all she had until next Friday's paycheck. The electric company had already sent 2 notices. Jordan needed his inhaler refilled. She'd been rationing her own meals to make their food stamps stretch. She pulled out the envelope and stared at it. The woman let out a small, pitiful sound, barely more than a whimper. Sarah's feet carried her to the rack before her brain could argue. She grabbed the thickest scarf she could find, navy blue wool, marked down to $14. Her fingers shook as she pulled out the bills. "What are you doing?" She spun around. A man stood a few feet away watching her. Tall, probably mid-30s, wearing a coat that looked like it cost more than her monthly rent. His dark eyes were fixed on the elderly woman in the wheelchair. "I'm sorry, is she with you?" Sarah asked. "She's my mother." His voice was tight-strained. "I turned my back for 2 minutes to take a call, and the driver just left her there. She's freezing. I need to—" "Williams." Holloway's voice cracked through the air like a whip. "Get back to your register. We got customers waiting." Sarah glanced back. 3 people in line now, looking impatient. She looked at the scarf in her hands, at the $15 that was supposed to keep the lights on, at the elderly woman who was someone's mother shaking like a leaf in the wind. "Ring this up for me, would you?" She thrust the scarf and money at Marcus, who'd appeared with an armful of paper towels. "Sarah, your electric bill." "Just do it. Please." Marcus's face crumpled with concern, but he took the items to the register. Sarah grabbed the towels and knelt beside the wheelchair again. She carefully patted the woman's face dry, then her hands, her arms. The woman's eyes flickered, seeming to focus on Sarah for just a moment. "You're safe now," Sarah murmured. "I promise you're safe." The well-dressed man crouched beside her. Up close, she could see the worry etched into his face, the tension in his jaw. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You didn't have to." "Williams, this is your final warning." She ignored him. Marcus brought over the scarf, and Sarah gently wrapped it around the elderly woman's shoulders, tucking it snugly around her neck. The woman's trembling began to ease. Her fingers reached up, touching the soft wool with wonder, like she was discovering texture for the first time. "There you go." Sarah smiled, even though her own hands were shaking now, not from cold, but from the weight of what she'd just done. No lights for Jordan. No way to see his nebulizer in the dark tonight. But this woman was warm. Heavy footsteps approached. Sarah didn't need to look up to know who it was. "You think you can just walk away from your register whenever you feel like playing hero?" Holloway's face was purple with rage. "You think I run a charity here?" Sarah stood slowly, meeting his eyes. She needed help. "She ain't your problem." He jabbed a finger at her chest. "You know how many customers complained about waiting. You know how this makes me look." The man in the expensive coat rose to his feet. "Excuse me, but—" "Stay out of this, sir. This is employee business." Holloway turned back to Sarah. "You're always pulling this kind of stunt, always thinking you're better than the job. Well, I'm done with it." Sarah's heart began to pound. "Mr. Holloway, please." "Oh, now it's please." He laughed a cruel sound. "That what this is about, you put on a little show for the rich guy hoping for a tip that's low, Williams. Even for you." Heat flooded Sarah's face. "That's not— I would never—" "You're fired." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a termination slip he must have already prepared. The man kept those things ready, like he enjoyed handing them out. "Effective immediately." The paper fluttered as he thrust it at her. It hit her chest and fell to the wet floor between them. Sarah stared at it. 4 months of walking 2 miles to work because she couldn't afford the bus. 4 months of swallowing insults and biting her tongue. 4 months of being the first one in and the last one out. Gone. "Pick up your final check next Friday and take off that apron. You're done representing this store." Her fingers moved to the apron strings. They felt stiff, uncooperative. She untied the knot and pulled the apron over her head. The Tower Mart logo, a stupid cartoon tower with a smiley face, crumpled in her hands. She set it on the checkout counter with as much dignity as she could gather. The elderly woman made a sound. Sarah looked down and found those cloudy eyes watching her with sudden clarity. The woman's hand reached out, fingers closing weakly around Sarah's wrist. "Stay warm, ma'am." Sarah's voice cracked. "Keep that scarf close, okay?" The woman's grip tightened for just a moment, and Sarah could swear she saw recognition there, understanding, maybe even gratitude. "Ma'am, I can't thank you enough." The man's voice was rough. "Please let me pay you back for the scarf for your trouble." "No need." Sarah gently extracted her wrist from the elderly woman's grasp. "You just make sure she gets somewhere warm." She walked toward the door, her wet shoes squeaking on the linoleum. The rain was still coming down in sheets, turning the parking lot into a lake. She had no umbrella, no car, no job, just the clothes on her back, and a brother waiting at home who needed medicine she couldn't afford. She paused at the threshold, rain misting her face. Behind her, she could hear Holloway already barking at Marcus to clean up the water. The normal sounds of the store continued: scanner beeps, the hum of refrigerators, that awful buzzing light. Sarah stepped into the storm. The rain was cold enough to take her breath away. Within 3 steps, she was drenched, but she kept walking, her head high, her shoulders straight. Behind her, through the store window, Ethan Cole stood watching. His mother clutched the navy scarf with both hands, her face peaceful for the first time in months. And in his pocket, his phone was already dialing his lawyer. Some acts of kindness changed everything. This was one of them. The walk home took 40 minutes in the rain. By the time Sarah reached the Oakwood apartments, her teeth were chattering so hard she bit her tongue. The complex was a graveyard of broken dreams, cracked windows patched with cardboard, rust-stained walls, and a parking lot full of potholes that could swallow a tire whole. She climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, her hand sliding along the wet railing. Apartment 3F, home. The door stuck like it always did, swollen from moisture and age. She put her shoulder into it and stumbled inside. Darkness swallowed her whole. No, the word came out as a whisper. She flipped the light switch. Nothing. The electric company had made good on their threat. Sarah. Jordan's voice drifted from the bedroom, thin and wheezy. Her heart dropped into her stomach. She kicked off her soaked shoes and rushed down the narrow hallway, using her phone's flashlight to guide the way. Jordan was sitting up in bed, his 12-year-old frame looking too small beneath the pile of blankets. His breathing came in short, labored gasps. Hey, I'm here." She sat beside him, pressing her hand to his forehead, warm but not feverish. "When did it start?" "About an hour ago." He coughed, the sound rattling in his chest. "I used the inhaler, but it's almost empty, and I couldn't. Shh, don't talk. Just breathe slowly. Okay, in through your nose, out through your mouth." She demonstrated, and Jordan tried to follow. His eyes were wide with fear, reflecting the phone's light. Sarah's mind raced through her options. The emergency room would treat him, but the bill would bury them. The free clinic was closed until Monday. She had maybe $2 in change scattered around the apartment, and she'd spent $15 on a scarf for a stranger. The thought hit her like a fist. What kind of sister was she? What kind of guardian put someone else's mother before her own brother Jordan could have died while she was playing Good Samaritan at Tower Mart? "I'm sorry," she whispered, pulling him into her arms. "I'm so sorry, Jay." "For what?" His voice was muffled against her shoulder. "Nothing, just rest." She eased him back down and arranged the blankets around him. "I'm going to tell you a story, okay, about a magic scarf." "Sarah, I'm not 5 anymore. Humor me." She settled beside him in the dark, her back against the headboard. Her wet clothes were soaking into the mattress, but she didn't care. Once upon a time, there was a scarf made of the warmest wool in all the world. It was blue like the deep ocean, and when you wrapped it around someone who was cold and scared, something magical happened. Their fears melted away. Their pain disappeared. They felt safe. Jordan's breathing was already starting to even out. He always responded to her voice to stories. It was the one gift their grandmother had given them before she passed, the art of turning hard truths into gentle tales. The scarf had a secret. Sarah continued, her own eyes growing heavy. Every time someone used it to help another person, even when it cost them everything, the universe remembered. And somehow, some way, that kindness would come back around. "Do you really believe that?" Jordan murmured. Sarah thought about the elderly woman's grateful eyes, the way her trembling had stopped, the moment of clarity when their gazes met. "Yeah," she said softly. "I think I do." Jordan fell asleep within minutes, his breathing still wheezy but stable. Sarah sat in the darkness, listening to the rain pound against the window. She needed to figure out their next move. Job hunting tomorrow. Maybe she could pick up some shifts at the diner on 5th Street. They were always looking for waitresses, and she could stomach handsy customers if it meant keeping the lights on. A knock at the door made her jump. She checked her phone. 9:30 at night. Nobody knocked at 9:30 unless it was the landlord demanding rent or trouble looking for a place to land. She crept to the door and peered through the peephole. 2 men stood in the hallway. One was the man from the store, the elderly woman's son. The other was built like a linebacker, wearing a black suit that screamed security detail. Sarah's hands went to the chain lock, but she didn't open it. "Can I help you?" "Miss Williams." The man's voice was clear, even through the door. "My name is Ethan Cole." We met earlier at Tower Mart. I need to speak with you. It's about my mother. Is she okay? Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Did something happen? She's stable, but she won't let go of the scarf. She keeps saying your name. Or at least we think it's your name. She's been saying Sarah for the past hour. That's the first word she's spoken clearly in 6 months. Sarah's hand trembled on the chain. 6 months of silence broken by her name. That didn't make sense. She'd spent maybe 10 minutes with the woman. I know this is unusual, Ethan continued. I know I'm a stranger showing up at your home late at night. But my mother has advanced dementia. She doesn't connect with anyone anymore. Hasn't for a long time. But today, with you, something changed. I saw the way you looked at her. The way you touched her hands like she was made of glass. Like she mattered. The door to 3G across the hall cracked open. Mrs. Patterson's suspicious eye appeared. Everything okay, Sarah? It's fine, Mrs. Patterson. Just some visitors. At this hour? The old woman's voice dripped with judgment. Ethan stepped back, giving the peephole a clearer view of his face. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to talk. 5 minutes of your time. Sarah looked back down the hallway toward Jordan's room. Her brother was asleep, safe for now. She thought about the electric bill, about the empty inhaler, about the long walk she'd face to job interviews tomorrow. She thought about an old woman's grateful eyes. She opened the door. Ethan Cole looked different in the dim hallway light. Younger somehow, despite the expensive haircut and designer clothes. His eyes had dark circles beneath them, and there was a weariness in his posture that money couldn't hide. Thank you. He glanced at the security guard. James, wait in the car. Sir, I don't think. I'll be fine. Ethan's tone left no room for argument. James nodded and disappeared down the stairs. Sarah stepped aside, painfully aware of the apartment's condition. Water-stained ceiling, peeling linoleum, the musty smell that came from old buildings that had seen too much rain and not enough repairs. Ethan entered slowly, taking it all in without comment. Sarah appreciated that he didn't pretend not to notice or offer empty platitudes about how cozy it looked. My brother's asleep, she said quietly, closing the door. We'll have to keep our voices down. Of course. He stood awkwardly in the narrow living room, clearly unsure where to sit. The couch had a broken spring, and the armchair was being held together by duct tape and prayers. You can sit there. Sarah pointed to the sturdier end of the couch. Just avoid the left cushion unless you want to spring in an uncomfortable place. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. He sat carefully. Sarah remained standing, arms crossed. She didn't know what to do with her hands, with the way he was looking at her, not with pity, but with something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or respect. I need to explain something about my mother, Ethan began. Eleanor Cole. She was diagnosed with Alzheimer's 3 years ago. It progressed quickly. Within a year, she didn't recognize me anymore. Didn't recognize my sister. We hired the best specialists, tried every treatment, every therapy. Nothing worked. Sarah lowered herself into the duct-taped armchair. I'm sorry. That must be incredibly hard. She stopped speaking 6 months ago, just went completely silent. The doctors said it was typical for her stage of decline. We hired round-the-clock nurses, but she doesn't respond to any of them. She just sits in her wheelchair staring at nothing. His voice cracked slightly. I was taking a conference call today. The driver was supposed to stay with her, but he got a call about his own mother having a fall. He panicked and left her there. By the time I finished my call and turned around, she was alone in the rain. And then I found her. And then you saved her. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Do you know what she did when we got home? She held that scarf to her face and cried. Actually cried. I haven't seen her cry since my father's funeral. And then she said your name. She pointed at the door and said Sarah over and over. A chill ran down Sarah's spine that had nothing to do with her wet clothes. Mr. Cole, I don't understand what you want from me. I want you to come work for us. Take care of my mother. The words tumbled out in a rush. I know you just lost your job because of what you did for her. I know that scarf cost you money you probably didn't have. I've already spoken with my lawyer about getting you compensation for wrongful termination, but that will take time. In the meantime, my mother needs you. Sarah stared at him. I'm not a nurse. I'm not trained in dementia care. I don't have any medical certifications. I don't care about certifications. Ethan's intensity was almost frightening. I have nurses. I have doctors. What I don't have is someone who looks at my mother and sees a person instead of a patient, someone who would spend their last $15 to keep a stranger warm. That was just basic human decency. Exactly. He pulled something from his inner jacket pocket, an envelope. "This is advance payment for 1 month of work. I'm offering you $5,000 to spend time with my mother, talk to her, read to her, just be present with her the way you were today." Sarah's vision blurred. $5,000. She could pay the electric bill, refill Jordan's medication, buy groceries that weren't day-old bread and dented cans. She could breathe for the first time in months. But something about it felt wrong, like charity dressed up as employment. "I can't accept this," she heard herself say. Ethan's expression didn't change. "Why not?" "Because I don't know if I can actually help your mother. What if today was just a fluke? What if she doesn't respond to me again? You'd be wasting your money on someone with no experience, no credentials. No fear." Ethan interrupted. "That's what you have that no one else does. You didn't flinch when you saw her in that wheelchair. You didn't hesitate. You didn't overthink it. You just acted. That's what my mother needs, someone who isn't afraid to treat her like she's still in there, still aware, still deserving of dignity." A wheeze came from the bedroom. "Jordan." Sarah's head snapped toward the sound. Ethan stood immediately. "Is that your brother?" "He has asthma. It's under control." The lie felt heavy on her tongue. "It doesn't sound under control." Another wheeze, sharper this time. Sarah rushed to the bedroom, Ethan following despite her silent wish for him to stay put. Jordan was sitting up again, struggling to breathe. She grabbed the inhaler from the nightstand and shook it. Nearly empty, just like he'd said. "Here, baby." Slow breath. She helped him take a puff. It barely seemed to help. "He needs a nebulizer," Ethan said from the doorway. "I know what he needs." Sarah's voice came out sharper than intended. "I'm his legal guardian. I've been taking care of him since our grandmother died 2 years ago. We're doing fine." "Sarah." Jordan's voice was barely a whisper. "Who's that?" "Just someone from work. Go back to sleep." But Ethan was already on his phone. "James, I need you to go to the nearest 24-hour pharmacy. Get a pediatric nebulizer and albuterol solution. Adult dosage of amoxicillin, too, in case there's an infection brewing. Charge it to my account." "Mr. Cole, stop." Sarah moved between him and Jordan's bed. "We don't need your charity." "This isn't charity. This is an advance on your employment benefits." His eyes were kind but unyielding. "You work for me now, which means you and your brother have access to the company health plan. I'm just expediting the process." "I didn't say yes to working for you." "Then say yes." He looked past her at Jordan, who was watching them with wide, confused eyes. "Say yes so that young man can breathe properly. Say yes so you don't have to choose between electricity and medicine. Say yes because my mother called your name, and that's a miracle I can't ignore." Sarah's resistance crumbled like wet sand. She thought about Jordan's labored breathing, about sitting in the dark, telling stories to keep fear at bay, about walking 2 miles in the rain to a job that fired her for doing the right thing. She thought about an old woman's fingers clutching a navy blue scarf. 1 month, she said finally. "Trial period. If your mother doesn't respond to me, if I can't help her, then we call it quits. No hard feelings." Ethan extended his hand. 1 month. Sarah shook it. His grip was firm and warm, and for just a moment, she let herself believe that maybe the universe really did remember kindness, that maybe her grandmother's stories about good things coming back around were more than just fairy tales for frightened children. "James will be here in 20 minutes, Ethan said, releasing her hand. "I'll wait with you until the medication arrives, if that's acceptable." It wasn't really a question, and Sarah was too tired to argue. She nodded and returned to Jordan's side, helping him settle back against the pillows. Ethan remained in the doorway, a silent sentinel in an expensive coat, watching over 2 strangers in a broken-down apartment. Outside, the rain continued to fall. But inside, for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt something that had been missing from her life for months. Hope. The Cole estate sat in Buckhead like a diamond on velvet, pristine, untouchable, and completely out of Sarah's universe. James drove through iron gates that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. The driveway curved through manicured gardens where even the flowers looked expensive. Sarah pressed her forehead against the car window, her stomach churning. Jordan was safe at home with Mrs. Patterson watching him, his new nebulizer humming softly beside his bed. That should have been enough to calm her nerves. It wasn't. "First time in Buckhead?" James asked, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. "First time north of Ponce de Leon Avenue in about 5 years. He chuckled. "It's just a house. Fancy sure, but still just walls and a roof." The house came into view. Sarah's breath caught. Just walls and a roof. The place was a mansion, 3 stories of pale stone and floor-to-ceiling windows that gleamed in the morning sun. A fountain bubbled in the circular courtyard. Actual marble columns flanked the entrance. "Dear God," Sarah whispered. "Wait until you see the inside," James said with a knowing smile. He wasn't wrong. The foyer alone was larger than her entire apartment. A crystal chandelier hung overhead, casting rainbow prisms across cream-colored walls. Fresh flowers, real ones, not plastic, perfumed the air. Sarah's second-hand sneakers squeaked on the polished marble floor, and she winced at the sound. "Miss Williams!" A woman appeared from a side hallway, her heels clicking with military precision. She was perhaps 50, with steel-gray hair pulled into a severe bun and a navy suit that screamed authority. "I'm Margaret Chen, the head of household staff. Mr. Cole is expecting you. Please follow me." Sarah followed, painfully aware of how out of place she looked. Her best pair of jeans had a patch on the knee. Her shirt was clean, but faded. She'd braided her hair to look professional, but compared to Margaret's polished appearance, she felt like a child playing dress-up. They walked through hallways lined with oil paintings and antique furniture. Sarah caught glimpses of rooms through open doors, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a dining room with a table that could seat 20, a sunroom full of exotic plants. Margaret stopped outside a closed door. "Mrs. Cole's suite. The medical equipment is state-of-the-art. We have 2 nurses on rotating shifts. Patricia handles days, Nicole takes nights. They'll brief you on Mrs. Cole's routine and medications." "I'm not replacing them, am I?" "No, you're supplementing them." Margaret's expression was unreadable. "Mr. Cole was quite specific about your role. You're here for companionship and emotional support, not medical care." She opened the door. The suite was beautiful, soft blue walls, gauzy curtains that filtered sunlight into something gentle and warm. A hospital bed had been disguised to look like regular furniture, and medical monitors blinked quietly in the corner. But Sarah's attention went straight to the figure in the wheelchair by the window. Eleanor Cole sat bathed in morning light, the navy scarf wrapped around her shoulders. She was staring at the gardens, her expression blank. A nurse in pale pink scrubs stood nearby, reading something on a tablet. "Patricia, this is Miss Williams, the new companion." Patricia looked up, her smile professional but guarded. "Nice to meet you. Mrs. Cole had a quiet night. She ate half her breakfast, took her medications without issue." The nurse's tone was clipped efficient. She was rattling off facts, not talking about a person. Sarah moved closer to the wheelchair. "Hello, Mrs. Cole. It's Sarah. We met yesterday at the store. Do you remember no response?" Eleanor's eyes remained fixed on the window. "She won't answer you," Patricia said. "She hasn't spoken since last night." Whatever response Mr. Cole witnessed was likely a temporary anomaly. The disease sometimes causes brief moments of clarity before what? Sarah knelt beside the wheelchair, bringing herself to Eleanor's eye level. "Before she disappears completely, is that what you were going to say?" Patricia's cheeks flushed. "I was going to say before further decline. We have to be realistic about her prognosis." "Realistic doesn't mean giving up." Sarah gently touched Eleanor's hand. The old woman's fingers were cold, despite the warm room. "Mrs. Cole, I brought you something. Would you like to hear a story?" Still no response, but Sarah could swear Eleanor's breathing changed slightly, became more focused. "My grandmother used to tell me stories about women who survived impossible things." Sarah began, her voice soft. "Women who picked cotton until their fingers bled but still found the strength to sing. Women who raised children in shacks with dirt floors but taught them to dream of mansions. Women who were told they were nothing but proved the world wrong just by refusing to disappear." Eleanor's head turned, just slightly, just enough for her eyes to shift from the window to Sarah's face. Patricia's tablet clattered to the floor. "Those women didn't survive because they were special." Sarah continued, her heart racing. "They survived because they refused to let the world's cruelty make them cruel. They chose kindness when kindness was a luxury they couldn't afford. They chose dignity when the world tried to strip it away." "Does that sound familiar, Mrs. Cole?" Eleanor's fingers twitched. Her lips moved, forming silent words. "It's okay," Sarah whispered. "You don't have to talk. Just listen. I've got plenty of stories, and I'm not going anywhere." The door burst open. A woman swept in like a cold front designer heels, striking the floor with sharp precision. She was beautiful in that intimidating way. Wealthy people often wear perfect blonde hair, flawless makeup, a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly salary back at Tower Mart. "So, you're the charity case my brother hired." The woman's voice was ice wrapped in silk. "I'm Charlotte Cole, and you are trespassing in my mother's room." Sarah stood slowly, instinctively moving between Charlotte and Eleanor. "I'm Sarah Williams. Your brother asked me to spend time with your mother." "I'm aware of what my brother thinks he's doing." Charlotte's eyes raked over Sarah with unconcealed disdain. "What I'm not aware of is why he thinks someone with zero qualifications is suitable to care for a woman with advanced dementia. Do you have any medical training, any certifications, any experience beyond working a cash register in the ghetto?" "Charlotte." Ethan's voice cut through the tension. He stood in the doorway, his expression thunderous. "That's enough." "Is it?" Charlotte wheeled on her brother. "You bring some random woman into our mother's home because she bought her a scarf. Do you hear how insane that sounds? We have professionals. We have protocols. We don't need—" She responded to Sarah. Ethan moved to his mother's side, kneeling just as Sarah had. She said her name. She cried. She engaged with another human being for the first time in half a year. If you can't see the value in that, then you're not looking at our mother. You're looking at a problem you want to solve with money and credentials. Charlotte's face flushed red. "How dare you suggest I don't care about mother? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts." Ethan took Eleanor's hand. "Look at her, Charlotte. Really look. She's calmer than she's been in months. Her breathing is steady. She's present." And that started the moment Sarah walked in. Sarah wanted to disappear. This wasn't her fight. This wasn't her family. She was just a woman from South Atlanta who'd made a stupid choice to spend her last $15 on a stranger. Now she was standing in a mansion watching siblings tear each other apart over that choice. "I should go," she said quietly. "No." Eleanor's voice was barely a rasp, but it silenced the room. "Stay." 3 heads turned toward the wheelchair. Eleanor was looking directly at Sarah, her cloudy eyes suddenly sharp with intent. Her fingers gripped the navy scarf tighter. "Mother," Charlotte's voice cracked. "Mother, did you just—" "Stay," Eleanor repeated. Her other hand reached out trembling until Sarah stepped forward and took it. "Story. Tell me. The story." Sarah's throat tightened. She glanced at Ethan, who nodded encouragement. Charlotte looked like she'd been slapped. "Okay," Sarah managed. "I'll tell you about the woman who walked through fire." She sat on the floor beside the wheelchair holding Eleanor's hand and began to speak. She told the story of her great-great-grandmother who'd walked 70 miles after slavery ended to find her children who'd been sold away, who'd survived on nothing but faith and stubbornness, who'd built a life from ashes and taught her daughters that survival was an art form. Eleanor listened, her eyes never leaving Sarah's face. Occasionally she'd nod or squeeze Sarah's hand. And when the story ended, she whispered one word that made Sarah's eyes burn with tears. "Beautiful." Charlotte left the room without another word, her heels echoing down the hallway like gunshots. Patricia mumbled something about checking medication schedules and disappeared. Margaret stood in the doorway, her expression softer than before, and quietly closed the door. Only Ethan remained. He watched his mother and Sarah with something like wonder on his face. "Thank you," he said so quietly Sarah almost missed it. She didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to explain that sitting on this expensive floor, holding an old woman's hand while telling stories about her ancestors, felt more right than anything she'd done in years. So she just nodded and kept talking, weaving tales of strength and survival, while Eleanor listened like every word was precious. Outside the window, Buckhead gleamed in the sunlight, a world of wealth and privilege that had never been meant for people like Sarah. But inside this room, none of that mattered. There was just an old woman who needed to remember she was more than her disease, and a young woman who knew exactly what it felt like to be invisible. For the first time since walking through those iron gates, Sarah felt like maybe she belonged here after all. 3 weeks passed like pages in a book Sarah couldn't put down. Every morning, James picked her up at 6:30. Every evening, he drove her home to Jordan, who was thriving with his new medication and the private tutor Ethan had insisted on hiring. Sarah had stopped protesting the help. You couldn't fight a river that insisted on flowing in your direction. Eleanor's transformation was subtle, but undeniable. She still had bad days where the fog wouldn't lift, where she stared at nothing and didn't respond to any voice. but the good days were becoming more frequent. She'd started eating more, sleeping better. She'd laugh sometimes at Sarah's stories, a sound like wind chimes that made everyone in the house stop and listen. Sarah had learned the rhythm of the Cole household. Margaret ran it with precision, but had warmed to Sarah after witnessing her calm Eleanor during a violent episode that had sent Patricia scrambling for sedatives. The other staff, the gardener, the cook, the housekeepers, treated Sarah with cautious respect. She wasn't quite one of them, but she wasn't quite one of the Coles either. She existed in some liminal space that made everyone slightly uncomfortable, except Ethan. He'd started spending more time in his mother's suite. At first, Sarah thought he was supervising her work, making sure she wasn't some elaborate con artist, but slowly she realized he was there for a different reason. He was learning how to talk to his mother again. "Tell me about your father," Sarah said one afternoon. Eleanor was napping in her chair, and Ethan had appeared with coffee for both of them. They'd fallen into this routine, quiet conversations while Eleanor slept, building trust in small increments. Ethan's jaw tightened. "What do you want to know?" "Whatever you want to tell me." Sarah cradled the expensive china cup, terrified of dropping it. "You mentioned he died. I'm sorry for your loss." "Don't be. I killed him." The words hung in the air like smoke. Sarah set down her cup carefully. "I don't believe that." "Believe what you want. It doesn't change the facts." Ethan stared at his coffee. "He had a heart attack in his office. I was supposed to meet him for lunch that day, but I canceled because of a merger meeting. By the time his assistant found him, it was too late. If I'd been there, he still would have had a heart attack." Sarah interrupted gently. "Hearts don't wait for convenient timing." "You don't understand. My father built everything from nothing. He worked 18-hour days, never took vacations, sacrificed his health for this company, and I was too busy playing corporate politics to have lunch with him. What kind of son does that make me?" Sarah thought about Jordan, about the nights she'd worked double shifts and come home too exhausted to help with homework, about the times she'd snapped at him for small things because she was drowning in stress. It makes you human. It makes you someone who didn't know that day would be his last chance. "My mother knew," Ethan said quietly. "She begged him to slow down, to retire early, to enjoy life while he still could. He wouldn't listen, and then he was gone, and she just unraveled. The Alzheimer's diagnosis came 6 months later, but I think she'd been slipping for a while. I think she'd already started disappearing into grief." Eleanor stirred in her sleep, murmuring something unintelligible. Sarah moved to her side, adjusting the scarf that had slipped from her shoulders. The old woman settled back into stillness. "She loved him very much," Sarah said. "She loved him too much. She made him her whole world, and when he left, she had nothing to stand on." Ethan's voice was rough with emotion. "Charlotte thinks Mother's illness is purely medical, but I think heartbreak accelerated it. I think she chose to forget because remembering hurt too much." Sarah returned to her chair, considering his words. "My grandmother used to say that love and grief are the same emotion wearing different clothes. You can't have one without risking the other. Your mother loved hard because that's who she was. That's not weakness. That's courage." "Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like surrender." "Then you're not sitting close enough." Sarah leaned forward, her voice steady. "Your mother is still fighting. Every time she responds to a story, every time she laughs or cries or says my name, she's fighting. The disease wants to erase her, but she's refusing to go quietly. That's not surrender. That's resistance." Ethan looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Make everything sound simple when it's not." "I don't make it simple. I just refuse to make it more complicated than it needs to be." Sarah smiled. "Your father died. That's a tragedy, but it's not your fault. Your mother got sick. That's another tragedy, but it's not a punishment. These things just happen. What matters is what you do after. Do you drown in guilt, or do you honor them by living fully?" "And which one are you doing?" Ethan's question was pointed, but not unkind. "With your parents gone and your brother to raise, are you living fully or just surviving?" Sarah flinched. He'd struck a nerve, and they both knew it. "I'm doing my best." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." She stood, needing space. "I should check on Eleanor's vitals. Patricia likes me to log them every 2 hours." "Sarah," Ethan's hand caught her wrist gently. "I'm not judging you. I'm trying to understand you. You show up every day and give my mother something I couldn't hope connection life, but you never talk about yourself, never share your own stories. Why? Because this isn't about me. This is about Eleanor. It's about both of you." He released her wrist but held her gaze. "You're healing her." "But who's healing you?" The question cracked something open inside Sarah's chest. She thought about Jordan's face when she'd told him about the job, the way he'd cried with relief, about the electric bill that was finally paid, the fridge that was actually full, about the nightmares she still had of her grandmother dying in that hospital bed, holding Sarah's hand and whispering apologies for leaving her alone. "Nobody heals me," she said finally. "I heal myself. That's how it's always been." "That sounds lonely." "It is." The admission surprised her. "But lonely is safe. Lonely means I don't owe anyone anything. Lonely means I can't disappoint anyone." "You could never disappoint anyone, Sarah. You're too good." "Don't do that." Her voice sharpened. "Don't put me on a pedestal. I'm not good. I'm just trying to survive like everyone else. I bought your mother a scarf because I have a weak spot for people in wheelchairs, not because I'm some kind of saint. And I took this job because I needed the money, not because I'm noble." "Why wheelchairs?" Ethan asked softly. Sarah's throat tightened. She hadn't meant to reveal that. "My grandmother. She spent her last year in one after a stroke. I used to push her to the park every Sunday. She'd tell me stories, and I'd tell her about my week. Those were the only times I felt like everything might be okay. And then she died. And then she died, and I had to learn how to be okay on my own." Sarah wiped her eyes roughly. "I don't want your pity, Ethan. I don't need it." "I'm not offering pity. I'm offering friendship." He stood, moving closer but maintaining distance. "You've given my family something precious. Let us give you something back. Not just money, but connection. Let us be part of your survival instead of just beneficiaries of your kindness." "I don't know how to do that." "Neither do I." He smiled, and it transformed his face. "We'll figure it out together." Eleanor woke then, her eyes searching the room until they found Sarah. "Story time." "Always." Sarah returned to her side, grateful for the interruption. "What do you want to hear today?" "Tell me about the girl who carried the world." Sarah glanced at Ethan, who was watching her with open curiosity. She took a breath and began. "Once there was a girl who had to become a woman too fast. Her parents left for heaven when she was young, and her grandmother tried to fill the empty spaces, but couldn't quite manage it. When the grandmother went to heaven too, the girl was left with her little brother and a world that didn't care if they survived or not." Eleanor's hand found hers. "Sad story." "It starts sad," Sarah agreed. "But the girl learned something important. She learned that the world doesn't give you strength. You find it in the people you love. Every time her brother smiled, she got stronger. Every time she helped someone who needed it, she got braver. And eventually she realized she wasn't carrying the world alone. The world was carrying her too." "Beautiful," Eleanor whispered. Ethan said nothing, but when Sarah met his eyes, she saw understanding there. He knew she'd been talking about herself. He knew every story she told Eleanor was also a story she was telling herself, reminders that survival was possible, that kindness mattered, that love was worth the risk of loss. And somehow, in this strange mansion with this strange family, Sarah was beginning to believe her own stories again. Charlotte had been unusually pleasant for the past week, which should have been Sarah's first warning. The woman had started joining them for afternoon tea, making polite conversation, and even laughing at Sarah's stories. She'd apologized for her initial hostility, blaming it on stress and fear of change. Sarah wanted to believe her. God, she wanted to believe that people could surprise you in good ways. "Sarah, dear," Charlotte said one morning, her smile bright and false, "that scarf Mother loves so much is looking rather worn. Why don't you take it to be properly cleaned? There's an excellent service downtown. Here's the address." Sarah examined the scarf. Charlotte was right. 3 weeks of constant use had left it pilled and faded. "I can just wash it here." "Nonsense. This fabric needs special care. I insist. Consider it a gift from me, an apology for my earlier behavior." Charlotte pressed a business card into Sarah's hand. "They're expecting you this afternoon." Something felt off, but Sarah couldn't articulate what. Eleanor was having a good day, laughing at Patricia's terrible jokes and eating her lunch without assistance. Taking the scarf for a few hours wouldn't hurt. "All right, thank you." Charlotte's smile widened. "My pleasure." Sarah left after lunch, the scarf carefully folded in her bag. The cleaning service was in a fancy part of town, all marble floors and soft music. They took the scarf with reverent hands, promising it would be ready by tomorrow. She should have felt relieved. Instead, dread pooled in her stomach. When she returned to the Cole estate, Margaret met her at the door. The woman's face was grave. "Miss Williams, Mr. Harrington wishes to speak with you in the library." "Who's Mr. Harrington?" "The family attorney." The dread crystallized into ice. Sarah followed Margaret through the house, her heart hammering. The library was intimidating: dark wood, leather-bound books, and windows that overlooked the gardens. A man in his 60s sat behind a massive desk, his silver hair and steel-rimmed glasses giving him the look of a judge about to pass sentence. Ethan stood by the window, his back rigid. Charlotte sat in a wingback chair, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Patricia stood near the door, looking uncomfortable. "Miss Williams." Miles Harrington's voice could have cut glass. "Please sit." Sarah remained standing. "What's going on?" "A valuable family heirloom has gone missing. Mrs. Cole's diamond engagement ring. It's been in the Cole family for 4 generations and is worth approximately $200,000. The floor tilted. "I don't understand." "The ring was in Mrs. Cole's jewelry box 3 days ago. It was discovered missing this morning during a routine inventory. You are the only non-family member with unsupervised access to Mrs. Cole's suite." "I didn't take any ring." Sarah's voice came out steadier than she felt. "I would never." "Of course you'd say that." Charlotte interjected, fresh tears spilling. "But we have to be thorough. You understand, don't you? Mother is so vulnerable. We have to protect her." Ethan finally turned from the window. His face was a mask, unreadable. "Miles, is this really necessary?" "I'm afraid so." "Miss Williams, would you consent to a search of your person and belongings?" "Absolutely." Sarah dropped her bag on the desk. "Search whatever you want. I didn't take anything." Miles opened her bag with clinical precision. Wallet, phone, bus, pass Eleanor's medication schedule that Sarah kept for reference, a granola bar. He examined each item, then moved to the pockets of the bag. His hand paused. Slowly, he withdrew something wrapped in tissue paper. Sarah's blood turned to ice. Miles unwrapped the tissue. A diamond ring glittered in the light, an enormous center stone surrounded by smaller diamonds set in platinum. Even Sarah, who knew nothing about jewelry, could tell it was worth a fortune. "No." The word barely made it past her lips. "That's not, I didn't. It was tucked into the lining of your bag." Miles's voice was colder than January. "Hidden deliberately." "I've never seen that ring before in my life." Sarah's voice rose. "Someone planted it. They had to have." "How convenient." Charlotte stood, her tears gone. "Of course you'd claim you were framed. That's what thieves always say when they're caught." "Charlotte, enough." Ethan moved toward Sarah, but she stepped back. "Don't." She couldn't look at him, couldn't bear to see doubt in his eyes. "I swear to you, I didn't take that ring." "The evidence suggests otherwise," Miles said. "Miss Williams, I strongly suggest you return any other items you may have taken. Cooperation now might—" "I didn't take anything." Sarah's hands were shaking. "Check my apartment. Search Jordan. Search everything I own. You won't find a single thing that doesn't belong to me because I'm not a thief." "Where's the scarf?" Ethan's question cut through her panic. "What?" "My mother's scarf, the blue one. Where is it?" "I took it to be cleaned. Charlotte gave me the address of a—" Sarah stopped. Understanding crashed over her like a wave. "She sent me away. She needed me out of the house with the scarf so she could—" Charlotte laughed, a brittle sound. "Listen to yourself. You're so desperate you're accusing me I'm trying to protect my mother from opportunistic criminals, and you're spinning conspiracy theories." "Give me your phone," Ethan said to Sarah. She handed it over with trembling fingers. He scrolled through her messages, found the text Charlotte had sent with the cleaning service address, and held it up to Miles. "My sister sent her there. Sarah didn't initiate this errand." "So what?" Charlotte's voice turned shrill. "I was trying to do something nice. I didn't know she was using it as an opportunity to hide her stolen goods." "In a scarf she was about to have professionally cleaned." Ethan's tone was dangerous. "That makes no sense, Charlotte." "Nothing about this makes sense. Why are you defending her? She's nobody. She came from nothing. These people see dollar signs when they look at us, Ethan. Wake up." The slap of her words stung worse than any physical blow. Sarah stood frozen, watching her life disintegrate. Everything she'd worked for, every connection she'd built with Eleanor, every moment of hope gone, erased by a diamond ring she'd never touched. "I want to see my mother," she said quietly. "Absolutely not," Miles interjected. "You're to have no further contact with Mrs. Cole pending investigation. She calls for me. She trusts me." "She's a confused old woman who doesn't know what's real anymore," Charlotte snapped. You took advantage of her condition to worm your way into this family, and when that wasn't enough, you started stealing. Well, it ends now." Charlotte strode across the library and grabbed Sarah's bag. Before anyone could stop her, she pulled out the scarf. The cleaning service must have returned it while Sarah was in the library and tore it down the middle. The sound of ripping fabric echoed like a scream. "This cheap thing," Charlotte hissed, tearing it again and again until nothing remained but scraps of navy blue wool scattered across the Persian rug. "This is what you used to manipulate my mother. Well, it's over. You're done here." Sarah stared at the destroyed scarf. Each piece felt like a part of herself being torn away. That scarf had been Eleanor's comfort, her connection to the world. It had been the bridge between them. Now it was trash. "Get out!" Charlotte's face was flushed with triumph. "Get out of my house before I call the police." "It's not your house," Ethan said, his voice dangerously quiet. "It's mine." "Then you throw her out, or are you so blinded by whatever pathetic attraction you have to this nobody that you can't see she's using you?" Ethan looked at Sarah, really looked at her. She saw the war happening behind his eyes, evidence versus faith, logic versus trust. She saw the moment evidence won. "I think you should go," he said softly. "Just for now, until we sort this out. Ethan, please." He couldn't meet her eyes anymore. "Just go." Sarah bent and gathered the scraps of the scarf. She didn't know why. They were ruined, useless. But she couldn't leave them there like garbage. She stuffed them into her bag, each piece a small funeral. "I hope you find the truth," she said, her voice steady despite the tears burning her throat. "I hope you look at the security cameras. I hope you ask yourself why I'd risk everything, my job, my brother's health, my future for a ring I didn't even know existed. But most of all, I hope Eleanor forgives you for this." She walked out of the library through the foyer with its crystal chandelier, past Margaret's stricken face and Patricia's carefully blank one. James was waiting with the car, but Sarah waved him off. She'd walked home in the rain once before. She could do it again. The iron gates closed behind her with a final damning click. Sarah stood on the sidewalk in her patched jeans and faded shirt, a bag full of torn fabric in her hands, and let herself feel the full weight of betrayal. She'd been a fool to think a girl from South Atlanta could ever belong in Buckhead. She'd been a fool to trust Charlotte's apology. Most of all, she'd been a fool to think Ethan Cole would choose her over his own blood. The rain started as she reached the first intersection. Of course it did. The universe had a sense of humor after all. Sarah pulled out her phone and called Mrs. Patterson. "I'm coming home early. Can you stay with Jordan for a few more hours?" "Of course, baby. Everything okay?" "No," Sarah said, watching the Cole estate disappear behind a curtain of rain. "But it will be." She'd survived worse than this. She'd survived this too, even if it felt like dying. Eleanor stopped eating. It started the day Sarah left. She refused breakfast, turned her face from lunch, and when Patricia tried to coax her into dinner, Eleanor struck the spoon from her hand with surprising strength. By the second day, she'd stopped responding to anyone entirely, not the nurses, not Margaret, not even Ethan. By the third day, she was crying. Silent tears that tracked down her weathered cheeks while she stared at nothing, her hands clutching at empty air where the scarf should have been. "She's grieving," the doctor explained to Ethan. "It's not uncommon for dementia patients to fixate on specific people or objects. The sudden removal of that source of comfort can trigger regression." "She's not regressing," Ethan said through gritted teeth. "She's heartbroken." Charlotte paced the suite, her earlier triumph replaced by agitation. "This is temporary. She'll adjust. We just need to give her time." "Time for what? To waste away?" Ethan watched his mother's tears with growing horror. She was getting better, Charlotte. She was coming back to us. And now, look at her. She'll come back again. We'll hire someone new, someone properly vetted this time. Ethan's phone buzzed. "James." "Sir, I think you need to see something." He found his security chief in the surveillance room, a converted office filled with monitors showing every corner of the estate. James sat at the main console, his face grim. "I've been reviewing footage like you asked, going through every interaction Miss Williams had with your mother, looking for any suspicious behavior." James pulled up a file. "I didn't find anything suspicious, but I found something else." He pressed play. The footage showed Eleanor's suite from 3 days ago, the morning the ring went missing. Charlotte entered at 6:47 a.m., nearly an hour before Patricia's shift began. She moved quickly to Eleanor's jewelry box, withdrew something small and glittering, then crossed to where Sarah's bag sat on the chair. Sarah always left it there when she arrived, taking only essentials to Eleanor's bedside. Charlotte opened the bag. Her hands moved inside it, clearly manipulating something in the lining. She withdrew empty-handed, glanced around the room, and left. The timestamp read 6:52 a.m. Ethan's blood turned to ice. "Show me more." James pulled up another file. "This is from your mother's medical pendant, the one with the camera for monitoring her health status. I almost missed it because we rarely check the footage unless there's an incident." This footage was closer, more intimate. It showed Sarah sitting beside Eleanor's wheelchair reading aloud from a book. Eleanor was smiling, engaged. Then Charlotte's voice came from off-camera. "Sarah, dear, that scarf Mother loves so much is looking rather worn." The conversation played out exactly as Sarah had described. Charlotte's suggestion, the business card, the insistence on professional cleaning. And through it all, Eleanor watched Sarah's face with perfect clarity, her eyes tracking every expression. She knew. Ethan whispered, "My mother knew Charlotte was lying." "There's more." James's voice was heavy. "This footage is from 2 hours before the ring was discovered missing. Watch Charlotte's left hand." The video showed Charlotte entering Eleanor's suite with Miles Harrington. As they talked about conducting an inventory, Charlotte's hand slipped into her jacket pocket and emerged empty. The angle wasn't perfect, but Ethan could see the glint of something being transferred from her hand to the desk. "She planted the ring twice," James said. "Once in Sarah's bag and once on the desk so Miles would discover it missing and initiate the search. She orchestrated the entire thing." Ethan sank into a chair, his mind reeling. Why? Why would she do this? "I have a theory if you want to hear it." "Please." James pulled up financial records on another screen. "I took the liberty of checking some things. Your sister's been making inquiries about your mother's will, specifically about what happens to the estate if you were to marry someone outside the family's social circle. The lawyers told her that, as your wife, Sarah would be entitled to certain protections and inheritance rights." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Charlotte hadn't been protecting Eleanor. She'd been protecting her inheritance. She'd seen Ethan's growing attachment to Sarah and decided to eliminate the threat before it could materialize into something legal. "I need these files compiled and secured," Ethan said, standing. "Every frame, every timestamp, every piece of evidence. And then I need you to find Sarah Williams and bring her home." "Already done, sir. She's in the south lobby. I picked her up 20 minutes ago, though she wasn't happy about it." Ethan's heart stuttered. "She's here now. I told her your mother was asking for her. It was the only way she'd agree to come." James met his eyes. "She's a good woman, Mr. Cole. I hope you know that." "I do now." Ethan headed for the door, then paused. "Thank you, James." "Just doing my job, sir." Sarah was standing by the windows, arms crossed defensively. She'd lost weight in just 3 days. Her eyes had dark circles beneath them, and her clothes hung looser than before. When she saw Ethan, her expression shuddered. "Where's Eleanor?" "Upstairs, not eating, not speaking, crying for you." Ethan approached slowly like she was a wounded animal that might bolt. "Sarah, I need to show you something. If this is about the ring, it's about my sister and her lies." He gestured to the surveillance room. "Please, just 5 minutes." She followed reluctantly. James had queued up the footage, and Ethan watched Sarah's face as she absorbed what the cameras had captured. Her expression went from confusion to disbelief to fury. "She framed me!" Sarah's voice shook. "She destroyed Eleanor's scarf and framed me for theft because she was afraid I'd marry you for your money." "It appears so." "I don't want your money." The words exploded out of her. "I don't want your house or your cars or your designer clothes. I wanted to help an old woman who reminded me of my grandmother. That's it. That's all it ever was." "I know." Ethan moved closer. "I know. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I'm sorry I let evidence override what I knew in my gut to be true. I'm sorry I asked you to leave when you'd done nothing wrong." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Do you know what these 3 days have been like? Jordan asking why I'm crying? Mrs. Patterson looking at me like I'm damaged goods. Sitting in our apartment knowing Eleanor was suffering, and I couldn't help her because your sister decided I wasn't worthy of basic human decency." "You're right, and I'm going to make this right." Ethan pulled out his phone. "Charlotte is about to face consequences for what she's done, but first, my mother needs you. Will you go to her?" Sarah wiped her eyes roughly. "Of course I will. I never stopped wanting to." They found Eleanor in her suite, Patricia trying desperately to get her to drink water. The old woman's face was streaked with tears, her hands still reaching for something that wasn't there. "Eleanor!" Sarah's voice was soft. Eleanor's head turned sharply. Her eyes widened. "Sarah." "I'm here." Sarah crossed to the wheelchair and knelt, taking both of Eleanor's hands. "I'm so sorry I left you. I'm so sorry." Eleanor cupped Sarah's face with trembling hands. "My girl, my sweet girl. Charlotte, she lied. She hurt you." "I know, but I'm okay. I'm here now." Sarah pulled the torn scraps of the scarf from her bag. "I saved these. I thought maybe we could sew them back together." Eleanor's tears came harder, but these were different. Relief, joy, love emotions that had been locked away for so long, finally breaking free. She pulled Sarah into an embrace, and Sarah held her like she was made of glass. "Don't leave again," Eleanor whispered. "Promise." "I promise." Ethan watched from the doorway, his throat tight. Patricia was openly crying now, and even James looked moved. The sound of heels on marble announced Charlotte's arrival. She swept into the suite, then froze when she saw Sarah kneeling beside their mother. "What is she doing here, I told you?" "I know what you told me." Ethan's voice was ice. "I also know what you did. James, please show my sister the footage." He pulled out a tablet, and Charlotte's face went white as she watched her own betrayal play out on screen. When it ended, the silence was deafening. "I can explain," Charlotte started. "Don't." Ethan cut her off. "Don't insult us with lies. You framed an innocent woman because you were threatened by her relationship with our mother. You destroyed something precious to Mother because your greed mattered more than her happiness. And you did it all while pretending to care about her well-being. I do care. I was protecting your inheritance, not our mother." Ethan's words were precise, surgical. "Sarah has shown Mother more genuine love in 3 weeks than you've managed in 3 years. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to apologize to Sarah. You're going to make a substantial donation to a charity of her choosing as restitution. And you're going to spend the next year volunteering at memory care facilities learning what actual caregiving looks like. You can't be serious, deadly serious, or I can have Miles press charges for theft and fraud. Your choice." Charlotte looked at Sarah, who was still holding Eleanor, her face buried against the old woman's shoulder. For just a moment, something like shame crossed Charlotte's features. "I'm sorry," she said stiffly. "Not to me." Ethan pointed at their mother. "To her, and to Sarah." Charlotte approached the wheelchair slowly. Eleanor looked up, her eyes clearer than they'd been in months. "Mother, Charlotte's voice cracked. "I'm sorry. I was afraid of losing you, and I let that fear turn me into someone cruel. I'm sorry." Eleanor reached out with one hand, still holding Sarah with the other. "Family," she said simply. "We're family. We heal." Charlotte took her mother's hand, tears streaming down her face. And in that moment, Ethan saw his family begin to mend, not because the damage was erased, but because someone had been brave enough to refuse to let it define them. Sarah had taught them that. Sarah, who'd walked through rain and humiliation and betrayal, but still came back when Eleanor needed her. He'd spend the rest of his life making sure she never regretted that choice. The spring came gently that year. Flowers bloomed in the Cole gardens with riotous abandon, and Eleanor spent hours by the window watching them sway in the breeze. She was failing, everyone knew it. The good days were outnumbered by confused ones now, and her body was growing frailer despite Sarah's constant care. But she was at peace. Sarah had sewn the scarf back together, each stitch careful and deliberate. It was ugly now, covered in visible repairs and mismatched thread. But Eleanor loved it more than ever. She called it her battle scar, laughing at her own joke, even when she couldn't remember why it was funny. Charlotte had kept her word. She volunteered at 3 different memory care facilities, and the experience had humbled her in ways Ethan hadn't thought possible. She came to visit Eleanor regularly now, sitting quietly while Sarah told stories, occasionally adding memories of her own. The sisters would never be friends, but they'd reached a tentative peace. Jordan had blossomed. The private school had diagnosed his reading difficulties and given him proper support. He visited the estate, sometimes doing his homework in Eleanor's suite while Sarah worked. Eleanor called him "my boy" and told him stories about Ethan at that age. And Ethan had stopped running from his grief and his guilt. He'd learned to sit with Sarah in comfortable silence, to share the weight instead of carrying it alone. On a Tuesday morning in late April, Eleanor woke more lucid than she'd been in weeks. Her eyes were sharp and focused when Sarah arrived. "My darling girl," Eleanor's voice was weak but clear. "We need to talk." Sarah exchanged a worried glance with Patricia, who immediately left to get Ethan. "What's wrong? Are you in pain?" "No pain, just clarity." Eleanor patted the bed beside her. "Sit with me. Let me look at your beautiful face." Sarah climbed onto the bed carefully, taking Eleanor's hand. The old woman studied her like she was memorizing every detail. "You saved my life," Eleanor said. "You saved mine first. Fair trade. No child. You saved my life from being meaningless at the end. You reminded me that I was more than this disease, that I could still connect, still love, still matter." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "Do you know what that gift is worth?" "Eleanor." "Hush. Let an old woman talk while she still can." Eleanor squeezed her hand. "I've been proud of many things in my life, my marriage, my children, my work with charity, but nothing has made me prouder than watching you walk through fire and emerge stronger." Ethan and Charlotte arrived, summoned by Patricia. They stood at the foot of the bed, both sensing this moment's importance. "My children," Eleanor said, her gaze moving to them. "You're both here. Good. Mom." Charlotte moved closer, her voice trembling. "What's happening?" "I'm saying goodbye." Eleanor said it simply, without fear. "My mind is clear right now, and I don't know how long that will last, so listen carefully." "Don't talk like that," Ethan said roughly. "You're going to be fine." "Ethan, my love, I'm dying. We all know it, but I'm dying grateful." She looked at Sarah again. "Because this woman taught me that the end of life doesn't have to be the end of meaning. She showed you both what real strength looks like. Not money, not power, but kindness in the face of cruelty." Charlotte was crying now, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. "I'm so sorry, Mother. I'm so sorry for what I did." "I know, darling, and I forgive you, but you need to forgive yourself." Eleanor held out her other hand and Charlotte took it. "Fear makes us do terrible things, but love can make us do extraordinary ones. Remember that." Eleanor looked at Ethan. "You blame yourself for your father's death. Stop. He wouldn't want that. He'd want you to live fully, love deeply, and take chances. He'd want you to be happy. Can you do that for me?" "I'll try." "Try harder." Eleanor's smile was gentle. "And when you're ready, tell this woman how you feel about her before she walks away thinking she doesn't belong here." Ethan's eyes flew to Sarah, who was studiously looking anywhere but at him. The air in the room grew thick with unspoken things. "Mother, you need to rest," Charlotte said, trying to change the subject. "I'll rest soon enough. Right now, I need to tell Sarah one more thing." Eleanor turned back to her, and Sarah's heart clenched at the love in those fading eyes. "You told me stories about strong women who survived impossible things, but you never told me the end of the girl who carried the world. How does her story end?" Sarah's throat tightened. "I don't know yet. It's still being written." "Then let me tell you how I think it goes." Eleanor's voice was getting weaker, each word an effort. The girl learned that she didn't have to carry the world alone. She learned that letting people help wasn't weakness, but wisdom. She learned that love, real love, doesn't care about where you come from or what you own. It only cares about who you are in the quiet moments when no one's watching. "Eleanor." "Let me finish." The old woman's grip tightened. The girl became a woman who changed lives just by being herself, who saved an old woman from drowning in loneliness, who taught a broken family how to heal, who showed a grieving son that it's okay to love again. And at the end of her story, she let herself be loved back. Because she deserved it. "Do you hear me, Sarah Williams? You deserve to be loved." Sarah was sobbing now, her tears falling on their clasped hands. "I love you. I love you so much. I know, darling. I've known since you spent your last $15 on a stranger." Eleanor looked at Ethan. "Take care of her. Take care of each other. Promise me." "I promise," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "Charlotte." "I promise, Mother. I'll do better. I'll be better." Eleanor's eyes were starting to close. "Sarah, tell me one more story. Tell me about the place where there's no pain." Sarah wiped her eyes and began to speak, her voice gentle as a lullaby. "There's a place beyond the stars where all the strong women go when they're tired of being strong. It's warm there and bright, and nobody hurts anymore. There's music and laughter, and the people you loved are waiting with open arms. Your husband is there, Eleanor. He's waiting to dance with you again." "Robert," Eleanor whispered. "I've missed him so much. He's missed you too, and he's so proud of you, proud of how you fought, how you loved, how you kept going even when it was hard. He can't wait to hold you again." "Will you be okay without me?" "I'll be okay because you taught me how." Sarah kissed Eleanor's forehead. "Thank you for letting me love you. Thank you for loving me back. Sweet girl. My sweet, strong girl. Eleanor's breathing was slowing, becoming peaceful. The scarf. Keep it safe. Remember me. Always. Eleanor's eyes closed. Her breathing grew softer, gentler, until it was barely there at all. Sarah held her hand and kept talking, kept telling the story of the beautiful place where pain didn't exist and love lasted forever. And when Eleanor's final breath whispered out, she was smiling. The silence that followed was profound, not empty, but full of love and loss, and the strange peace that comes when someone dies surrounded by people who mattered. Charlotte broke first, her sobs filling the room. Ethan moved to his mother's other side, taking her hand, his tears falling silently. Sarah stayed where she was, still holding on, still keeping watch. "She's with Dad now," Ethan said finally. "Yeah." Charlotte managed a watery smile. "She is." They stayed like that for a long time, the three of them surrounding Eleanor, holding her in death the way she'd held them in life. And when they finally let go, when they finally called the doctor and the funeral home, something fundamental had shifted. They were a family now, not perfect but real, bound together by an old woman's love and a young woman's kindness. Eleanor would have been pleased. The funeral was beautiful and simple, exactly what Eleanor would have wanted. White flowers, soft music, and stories, so many stories about a woman who'd loved fiercely and lived fully. Sarah spoke last, her voice steady as she shared the tale of the scarf and the stranger who'd become family. There wasn't a dry eye in the church. 3 months later, Sarah stood in the parking lot of Tower Mart, now renamed the Eleanor Cole Community Market. The transformation had been Ethan's idea, but Sarah's vision, a grocery store where single mothers could shop without shame, where people in wheelchairs could reach every shelf, where kindness was policy rather than exception. The building looked the same from the outside, but inside everything had changed. Fair wages, health benefits, and a strict anti-harassment policy. No employee would ever be fired for helping someone in need again. "Miss Williams." A familiar voice made her turn. Holloway stood a few feet away, looking smaller somehow in his civilian clothes. "I wanted to apologize for how I treated you, for firing you, for every cruel thing I said." Sarah studied him. He'd aged in the past year, new lines around his eyes, gray in his hair that hadn't been there before. "Apology accepted." "That's it?" He sounded surprised. "What else is there? You made a mistake. You're sorry. I'm not going to make you grovel." Sarah gestured at the building. "You start Monday. Volunteer coordinator. You'll be helping people with mobility issues navigate the store, carrying groceries to their cars, organizing wheelchair accessibility programs." "Yes, ma'am." Holloway's voice was humble. "I won't let you down. Don't do it for me. Do it for every person you overlooked because they weren't convenient or profitable." Sarah's tone was firm, but not unkind. "Do it because Eleanor Cole believed people could change if given the chance. Prove her right." He nodded and walked away, his shoulders straighter than before. Jordan appeared from inside the store, now 13 and towering over Sarah. "Charlotte needs you in the community center." Something about the opening ceremony. The community center was adjacent to the market, a space for tutoring programs, senior activities, and therapy services. Charlotte ran it with surprising passion, having found purpose in serving rather than controlling. Sarah found her in the main hall directing workers who were hanging a massive banner, the Eleanor Cole Memorial Center. "What do you think?" Charlotte asked. "She'd love it." "I hope so." Charlotte's expression softened. "I've been thinking about what Mother said, about fear and love. I spent so long being afraid of losing what I had that I forgot to appreciate it, forgot to use it for something meaningful." "You're making up for it now." "Am I?" Charlotte's question was genuine. "Sometimes I wonder if any of this matters, if I'm just trying to absolve myself." "It can be both," Sarah said. "Redemption isn't instant. It's a series of choices. You're choosing better. That matters." Charlotte smiled, and it transformed her face. "Thank you for not giving up on me, on any of us." The ceremony that afternoon was simple but moving. Local officials spoke about community development. Jordan read a poem he'd written about second chances. Sarah cut the ribbon, thinking about how far she'd come from that rainy day when she'd spent her last $15. Afterward, Ethan found her standing alone by the wheelchair accessibility ramp, watching families enter the market. "Happy?" he asked. "Overwhelmed? Grateful? Terrified I'll wake up and this will all be a dream?" Sarah leaned against him slightly. "Normal, happy things. They'd been dancing around their feelings for months now, both too cautious to make the first move. Eleanor's death had bonded them in ways Sarah hadn't expected. They'd grieved together, planned together, built this legacy together, but they'd never quite crossed the line from partnership to something more. "I've been thinking about what my mother said," Ethan started. "About telling you how I feel before you walk away, thinking you don't belong." Sarah's heart began to race. "Ethan, you belong, Sarah, not just here in this project, but in my life. You've been part of my family since the day you pushed my mother's wheelchair out of the rain. I've just been too much of a coward to admit how much you mean to me." "You're not a coward. I am about this." He turned to face her fully. "I love you. I've loved you for months. Maybe since that first day when you spent money you didn't have to keep a stranger warm. Maybe the first time you made my mother laugh. I don't know exactly when it started, but I know I don't want it to end." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of this being temporary. Of waking up and realizing I'm still just the girl from South Atlanta who doesn't fit in your world. Of losing you the way I've lost everyone else I've loved. You fit perfectly in my world because you made it better just by being in it." Ethan took her hands. "And I can't promise you forever because none of us know how long we have. But I can promise you that for as long as I'm here, I'm choosing you. Every day, every moment, I'm choosing us." "Ethan Cole, are you about to propose to me in a grocery store parking lot? Would that be terrible?" Sarah laughed through her tears. "It would be perfect, because grocery store parking lots are where we started." He knelt right there, pulling a small box from his pocket. The ring inside was simple, a single diamond on a silver band. Nothing ostentatious, nothing that screamed wealth, just beautiful. "This was my grandmother's ring, the one thing my mother asked me to save from her jewelry box. She wanted you to have it." Ethan's voice was thick with emotion. "Sarah Williams, you taught me that kindness isn't weakness and that love is worth the risk. Will you marry me?" "Yes." The word came out as a sob. "Yes, of course, yes." He slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her, and around them people started applauding. Sarah hadn't even noticed they'd drawn a crowd, Jordan whooping, Charlotte crying, James grinning, like he'd personally orchestrated this moment. Maybe he had. They pulled apart, foreheads pressed together, both laughing and crying at once. "Your mother would have loved this," Sarah whispered. "She knew." Ethan said, "She knew before either of us did. That day you pushed her wheelchair, she grabbed my arm when you weren't looking. She was lucid for just a second, and she said, 'That one. Don't let that one get away.' She was a smart woman, the smartest." 6 months later, they married in the gardens of the Cole estate, surrounded by everyone who mattered. Charlotte stood as Sarah's maid of honor, having insisted, despite Sarah's protests. Jordan walked Sarah down the aisle, pride radiating from every step. The ceremony was simple, but one detail made it extraordinary. Sarah wore Eleanor's repaired scarf over her wedding dress, ugly stitches and all. It was a reminder of where they'd started, of the kindness that had changed everything. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Sarah could swear she heard Eleanor's laugh in the wind chimes. The Eleanor Cole Foundation grew beyond anyone's expectations. They opened 3 more community markets, 5 memory care facilities, and a network of scholarships for students like Jordan who just needed someone to believe in them. Sarah ran it all with Charlotte's help, finding purpose in turning pain into progress. Jordan graduated top of his class and went on to medical school, specializing in respiratory therapy. He never forgot where he came from or who'd fought for him to have better. Holloway completed his volunteer year and stayed on as full-time employee, eventually becoming one of the market's most beloved figures. People called him Mr. H, and he called them family. And on rainy days, when the weather turned cold and gray, Sarah and Ethan would stand in the market parking lot and watch for people who looked lost or struggling. They'd approach, gently offer help quietly, and just sometimes, they'd give someone a warm scarf and change their life. Because that's what Eleanor had taught them. That kindness was never wasted. That one small act of compassion could ripple outward in ways you'd never imagine. That love, real love, was built in the small moments when you chose to see another person's humanity. Sarah had started with $15 and a stranger in the rain. She ended with a family, a legacy, and proof that her grandmother's stories were true. The universe did remember kindness. And it always came back around.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.